So our next question, Lester, you've recently published Flow, An Ancient Way to Do Contemporary Worship. Fantastic new book. So tell us about what's the main premise of Flow and how does it change the way we think about ordering our worship services?
Okay, the main premise is a really kind of peculiar one. Is how can you take the order of worship from one of our most ancient witnesses of that order of worship, Justin Martyr from the mid-2nd century, where he talks about gathering and then we read like crazy and then there's a sermon and then intensive prayer, first intercession and then communion, and then we depart. It's that fourfold order that's behind all of the recent mainline denominational renewals of their books and liturgical text. How can we take that ancient order of worship and do it in a way that a modern Pentecostal would feel entirely at home with?
Nice.
So we're trying to bring in ancient sources and conversation with this Pentecostal notion of flow. That's where the book title comes from, which is so critical to how the Pentecostals originated praise and worship.
Right.
And that's the basic premise, is doing an ancient way of worship in a way that's truly contemporary, if I can reframe it just a little bit.
That's cool. So a collision, really.
It's really a collision. And I wasn't the sole author to the book. It was, in fact, I did not write most of it. It's these amazing doctoral students that we have here at Duke wrote most of it. But I wrote the introduction, and I wrote the introduction. And I said, there's a deep irony in the missed opportunity of 25 years ago, 30 years ago, when all the mainline denominations were waltzing out their new resources, denominational books of worship. They were trying to supplant traditional worship just as much as contemporary praise and worship has been trying to supplant praise and worship. But they didn't form an alliance. And so Flow, the book, is about trying to form an alliance between the ancient and this world of praise and worship or contemporary worship.
Very cool. So if we were to take that premise and we're like, give it feet on the ground, you know, if I'm coming in as a worship leader and, well, one, you say, hey, go pick up the book and read it. Noted. So I'll do that. But if I haven't had time to do that yet, what's your advice on how to take that premise and integrate that into my own practice or into my church's practice or congregants' practice of worship?
Well, the book actually arose out of a class that I was teaching with the rather innocent name Planning Contemporary Worship. But I'd had the idea of bringing these worlds into conjunction. And so I just picked up kind of a really ordinary sounding name for the class. So the book arose out of our coursework. And I mentioned that because there was a class exercise that we did one day that I think encapsulates the whole approach. And for anybody who wants to take the next step here, even without reading the book Flow, is a good next step for them to do. We asked them to take the order of worship from the United Methodist Book of Worship, which looks like a list printed sequentially on the page. It's how you have to present something on a page when you're printing it. We told them to turn that into a narrative story of encounter between God and people. So not a list at all, but a story of encounter. And that what it forced us to do is to go beyond the simple kind of label, hymn of praise, to trying to think in terms of plot. Why would praise be appropriate at that moment? What is praise at that moment? What would be a fitting way to do praise in that particular point in the plot? And then we just spun that out for the entire listed order of worship on the page, and you ended up essentially like an abstract for an action movie. And then we did that, and then I had the students all broken up into working groups. I said, now go take your plot line and actually start to fill it out in terms of what songs we're going to sing, what we're going to pray, that sort of thing. Um, so, yeah. Can you turn a listed order of worship, which is just kind of a sequential list of things? It looks like an
Yeah.
agenda or a business meeting many times.
Right.
Can you turn that into a dynamic story of encounter? And
That's fascinating.
at a minimum, it changes perspective on what a order of worship is and what a worship service is.
Yeah. And it's funny, like even the semantics of it, to use the word order, right, carries, for me, it carries almost a sterilization, an abstraction, but and linearity, right? But you change that to narrative, it still has linearity, still ordered, but it's alive. It starts to breathe because it's narrating that encounter, which is at the core of what we're doing in worship.
When I'm teaching on this, one of the examples I like to use, analogies I like to use is the difference between a play-by-play description of a sporting event and then the narrative description of that same part of a game. The information is the same, but there's a dynamic quality to the narrative description of it. You get beyond raw data. And I will tell you, it was a hard exercise for the students. Many of whom were very experienced contemporary worship leaders.
Okay.
I mean, there was some outstanding musical talent in this class.
Yeah.
What it forced them to do is to realize that they were flipping a switch in their head when they were opening the book of worship. And so I was trying to get them to unflip that switch, the same sort of dynamic expectation of encounter that they were used to using in planning praise and worship or contemporary worship, to keep that same sort of perspective as they opened the book of worship and they saw a raw list in raw form. And it was a hard thing for them.
Yeah. I mean, that makes perfect sense. So one of your suggestions then would be there's a natural, maybe not natural, there's a learned bifurcation. And when we as worship leaders, if we come out of the contemporary kind of fold, we've got this kind of charismatic bent to it that's deeply affective and it's deeply narrative based. But when we come to these books, we turn that off and start to go in this kind of abstracted, cerebral order. And you're saying, no, don't bifurcate, holistically integrate. And the hinge, I think I hear, is narrative in a sense. Like let the narrative be the hinge that puts these two things together.
Yeah, and again, if I'm bringing my worship history here, I'm actually influenced by a couple of ancient sources here, both Eastern. Maximus the Confessor on the one hand, and Germanus, who was Patriarch of Constantinople. They both wrote out materials where they described the order of worship, that classic fourfold order of worship, as this narrative of dramatic divine action. And it's quite amazing to see that from 1,500 years ago.
Yeah, that's really cool. Well, that's awesome. I mean, that sounds like a great suggestion.
Yeah, I feel like it's got decent historical pedigree to it.
Yeah,
too.
Yeah.
If you've got the Patriarch of Constantinople on your side, that's you're in good stead.
Awesome.